Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Community Connections, Resources, and Gardening. My name is Quandra Gaines, and I'm your host. I want to take care of everything. Thank you, Donnie Glover and the Black USA News, for the opportunity to have this show on the air every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. I want to share this week was quite eventful for me. I had the opportunity to be on Wake Up Baltimore with my esteemed co-host Mike Haney Monday, where I got to talk about urban gardening, and then I was on the Black Business Roundtable with my brother program with Doug Blackshear and Dr. Ashley, where we kicked off East and West collaboration to motivate, educate, and inform citizens about the importance of voting right people in the office. And today, I would like to thank Mike Haney and Doug and Dr. Ashley for their warm welcome to me as their guests on their show. So today, I would like to introduce Mr. Albert Phillips Jr., who is a work-based learning specialist at Baltimore City Public Schools, a CEO and founder for Rebellious Black Soul, which I'm going to find out more about, and an author of Yall Hiring, where he provided a culturally relevant roadmap to the different phases of employment process, from going after a job, maintaining that job, and then if you have to leave, graciously putting in to leave that job in a professional and thoughtful manner. So good morning, Mr. Phillips, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you to who's watching and checking us out this morning.
Yes. Okay. Now, Mr. Phillips, can you introduce yourself and inform the public about who you are and what you're currently doing in your role as an author, as a CEO and founder of an organization, and what does that mean when you say work-based learning specialist in Baltimore City Public Schools?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Albert Phillips Jr. I am a writer, which is a part of me being an author. I actually need to update my bio because I'm actually in grad school again. I'm at University of Baltimore. They have a creative writing and publishing arts program, an MFA program. So I'm there as well. But as far as an author, I published my first book, Yall Hiring, The Black Teens Guide to Navigating Employment, in 2020, which was, pretty much during the height of the pandemic. And I was home and I was thinking about writing a book. And I thought about, well, what could be the first book that I produce? And I thought about my experiences, both as a teenager in the city, but then also as a workforce development practitioner. So working with
as a teenager in the city,
throughout the
also as a workforce development practitioner. So working with as a teenager in the city, also as a
it is. Okay.
It's gone. So just being able to put out a book, and so I landed on this book. The title actually came from me walking to Mondawmin Mall and grabbing and going to the Great Cookie and like seeing a young girl come over from Douglas High School across the street and just be like, "Hey, y'all hiring?" And I was like, "Boom, that's the title." And I was dreaming up a title that was culturally relevant, that was attractive to our young people, and that would be memorable. And so that's the author piece with the hiring that I self-published. And then you asked about being a work-based learning specialist at City Schools. So this is my third year in that role. And essentially, City Schools decided, like many other school systems around the country, that our young people, particularly our high school students, but even our younger students as well, they needed more support with being ready for careers after graduation. And so research just has shown that even if our young people, they get their high school diploma, if they're in one of our career and technical education programs or trades, as many people know them as, they might be earning an industry credential, but they may not have earned, or they may not have gained experience that is career related while in high school, meaning specifically they may have never had an internship. They may have never gone to a job site. They may have never had a conversation with an employer. And so
Mm-hmm.
you want to be able to embed that within their school experience so that when they graduate, they're more prepared, they're more informed, and they can make more thoughtful decisions. So that's a lot of work that I do at Baltimore City Public Schools.
Okay, so you kind of touched on a lot of things, but I wanted to ask the question, why did you feel that it is important to write a culturally relevant employment guide specifically for Black teens?
Absolutely. So a lot of the resource materials that I was using as a workforce development practitioner, they lack cultural relevancy, meaning specifically they didn't speak to the realities of
Mm-hmm.
our young people. They didn't show them, they didn't provide that real world kind of tangibility when it comes to describing the workplace. Much of it, I would say, was just kind of like fall in line and do what I say sort of documents that I was using, but it didn't seem very encouraging. It didn't seem
Mm-hmm.
very uplifting, and it didn't speak to the realities of our young people. And so those things made me think about how do I make my book in a different fashion. So in the book, I actually talk about parts of my teenage work experience. It's not
Okay.
just like you open it up and it's chapter 1 and it's like, go get a suit, learn how to interview. Chapter 2, go do a resume.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to really embed some realer experiences, some realer examples, and that was important for me when I think about our young people.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Next question. Considering it that there are, I'm not going to say, I'm going to say there are a lot of youth that are going to be entering the job market very soon. So I'll say hypothetically, not going to say a billion, but I will say 1 million kids, teenagers, young adults who are, let's say, 14 and up who are going to look for jobs. But then YouthWorks opens up to what, 13 and a half, 14?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So all those kids who are now going out for YouthWorks jobs or for those fast food jobs, or even I know I have a 16-year-old who works in a realtor office as a secretary. So those jobs, do you think that they're prepared?
Well, it depends on how well their communities have prepared them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say, realistically speaking, a lot of them may not be prepared because there's not a holistic, systemic process for preparing our young people. So a lot of times it's like they may get a little bit in school.
Mm-hmm.
Like we even talked earlier before the show started. They may get some at home, or they
Mm-hmm.
may not, or they may get some if they go to church. Their church might do something, or they're part of like a mentoring program. Maybe some of it gets there, but there's not like a system that is kind of universal for all of our young people. Not just even in Baltimore City, because the book is not just for Baltimore Cities,
Mm-hmm.
for young people around the country. But there's not something that all of our young people are going to in order to come out on the other end prepared. I mean, even when we think about our education systems, right, that are supposed to help our young people with reading, writing, right, all these different skills, how many of our young people graduate and they and they still struggling to read and write and do basic things, right? And so we have to improve our systems if we want better outcomes. And that's what I honestly believe in. And so I think some of our young people, they will be more prepared than others. They probably have had some sort of experiences. They've gotten mentorship. Somebody has helped to guide them in order
Mm-hmm.
to be more prepared. Maybe they worked on a resume in their school, or maybe they had an internship before, or maybe their parent works at a company and they've been kind of giving them advice all along, right? And then you might have other young people who may not have any of those experiences at all. And so it's hard to put an exact percentage or an exact number, but I do think as a community, we have to think about how do we better prepare our young people for employment.
Okay, so let's tie right into the question I was going to ask. How can parents, teachers, community members, and church leaders help within this process? Should these groups be trained to assist in this process? Why or why not? And do you provide training of that type to leaders and church members and parents?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I've been asked a few different times. along with the book, people have asked me to create different materials to help assist. And one of the things that I've done is create a free discussion and activity guide that you can get from my website, yallhiring.com today. And you put in your email, you can download a PDF. And really what it does is go through each part of the book and it gives you the different discussions that you can have with a young person or they can have with other young people. Also activities that they can do. So as opposed to just like giving a book and say, hey, read this and figure it out, you can actually make it a process. And I feel like that increases the learning of it. In addition to that, in this discussion and activity guide is Common Core standards a lot aligned so that school systems can see that, oh, this is not just activities or discussions that they're having. This is tied to the learning outcomes that we want our students to master. So for example, in all the curriculum in our school system, they're supposed to be aligned to certain learning standards. And so there are reading standards, there are writing standards, there are college and career standards. The average person might not know all of this, but I did want to embed it within the guide in order to show that they're not just answering questions, they're not just talking, but this is also academic in a way as well, right? Like we can have fun activities, we can grow and learn and develop, and it can help boost their academic awareness and skills. And so that's one resource I provide to whoever wants to use it in order to help them flesh out more of the concepts in the book. In addition to that, I do want to create a workbook to be able to support the book. And I also want to do another edition of this book. This is a few years away now. It's not coming out like tomorrow, but I do want to do that because I think that there are some things that I want to bolster in the book. And then there are also some areas that I think maybe I didn't focus on enough in the book. So those things are coming. But as far as me supporting people in the community, parents, church leaders, and others, I'm always down to connect. I've done numerous trainings, workshops with adults, with teenagers, with young adults. So we can certainly talk, and we can talk about how can we bolster this book for our young people.
Okay. Now, with your experience as a teacher in the charter school system and now the workforce-based learning specialist, what ages do you feel that this information that you're providing in this book should be introduced to youth and why?
That's another great question. I think when a lot of people initially saw the cover of the book, they assumed like, oh, it's only for males or for young men or for Black teens that identify as male. However, my target audience is Black teenagers across the country. So we think really like that 14 and 19 age range. However, programs have told me like, hey, we're using this book for our young adults up to age 22. And we found that it's been effective. And then even some of our younger students, maybe 13, possibly even 12, just to learn some of the basic concepts that are in it. They might not be able to grapple with everything. It has been effective for them as well. So that's kind of the target audience when I think about this book.
Okay. Now, what barriers will Black youth face without proper tools to navigate in today's market versus their white counterparts? And then that's a two-part. So that's the third. This is the third. Is it easier or harder for the Black youth and why?
Well, it's certainly harder. It's certainly harder for Black youth, unfortunately. And, it's been that way for a long time, not just for youth, but for Black people in this country in general. And we know that and we understand that. But I think sometimes we think about like how hard and oppressive systems can be for Black adults. But how often do we think about how do those oppressive systems trickle down to our young people? And how does it provide a disadvantage to them? And so I purposefully started this book after the preface. We go right into hiring discrimination, not as like a fear tactic, but I want you to be well aware that discrimination exists even before you can get into the job. there's a possibility that you can be discriminated against. And so that shows up in a variety of ways. There's been studies from Harvard that show even on a resume, if you are, if your name is not sounding as quote unquote white as another name, that could be a form of discrimination. I always talk to young people about their social media platforms and their awareness there, because you never know who's looking. I think there was a study by Career Builder that said I think at least 70% of employers will go and try to look you up some sort of way prior to even bringing you in for an interview. And so I'm just like, just be aware, always be aware. In addition to that, you know, there's so many ways, and it's unfortunate because I think that, as I said earlier, they're not systems that talk to us about all of these things, right? That make us perform. Even when we think about wages in the pay gap, right? There's a big difference between women and men. Definitely black women and white men. And even here in Baltimore City, I put one example in the book. There was a woman who worked at Hooters downtown, and I believe the year was 2015, and she was a black woman, and she had like dyed her hair a little bit and maybe done like some blonde streaks, and her white supervisor was like, "Hey, something to the effect of, why is your hair like that? Black people, their hair isn't like that. Your hair shouldn't be like that." And so,
Okay.
okay, well, she went ahead and hired a lawyer. She started documenting, various things that the supervisor was saying to her, and possible employees in the workplace. And she was able to sue Hooters for $250,000.
Okay.
Right now, all forms of discrimination don't lead up into a lawsuit,
Right.
but I do think that we should be informed of, if we get this job, we're in a workplace, am I being treated correctly? Do I know my rights as a worker? Do I know how to advocate for myself? These are conversations I don't think we have with young people enough, because we get stuck on, boy, just go to work, just get the job, and just figure it out, right? Sometimes how many adults do we know that work in jobs that treat them like trash? The supervisor, like, they're horrible. They're talking down, they're demeaning, but we just preaching like, just go get a job, go get a job, go get a job, which I think is important. But how do we think about when they have that job? How do they use their voice? How do they advocate for themselves so they're not taken advantage of? So they're not working like, you know, crazy hours. You're maybe slated to work this hours, but you work 20 hours over that, or you're asked to do these assignments that have nothing to do with your role, right? Like asking young people, does your job have an HR department? Do you have a union that can advocate for you? These things that I just think are missing from the conversation that I try to embed within the book.
Okay. Now, in your book, you did include the importance of youth celebrating their greatness. Now, and while they were also preparing themselves for the workforce. So, can you be more specific why that is important for you?
Yes, absolutely. I think our young people are inherently great, and I honestly believe that. And I know that there's this notion, especially when we think about teenagers, even in Baltimore and other parts of the country, that they're like a disgrace in a way, like even even down to the squeegee boys, right? It's like the scum of the earth. They're like the worst thing that ever happened to us. But I still have a belief that our young people are brilliant. I think they're very creative. I think if given the proper tools, they can do a lot of great things in this world. And so that's why I start the book in the way that I do. Um, just telling them like, hey, you're great. We also live in a world that discriminates against you. That in some ways, and some people, in some systems, they don't care about you. They don't value you a lot. But I want you to know that I value you and I care about you, which is a part of the reason why I put this book together. And they're not, you're not going to see things like that in any employment guide anywhere, because they're just focused on like, hey, just get the job. But I also wanted, again, for this to be empowering and educational, and to have a different sort of conversational tone and approach to it. There was one young person who read the book, and she told me that she actually felt seen within the book. Like she felt like she could see herself and her reality within the book, whereas other things that she read, she may not have seen that. And so I think you could do both at the same time. I think you can teach a young person a lesson, right? But then you can also be you can be cognizant of who they are and still be uplifting in a way. I don't think it has to be one or the other, and that's why I attempted to show in the book.
Okay, so you also talked about a youth workforce discrimination. Why do you think a youth should be aware of that, and how do okay? So let me put that together. Let me go back here. So why do you think that's important? Why should a youth be aware of workforce discrimination, or at least be aware of how to identify it, understand it, and what process they can use to eradicate it?
Yes, I think the more informed you are, the better decisions that you can make. Not even just for our youth, but universally. Like when you know things, what they say, when you know better, you do better. Hopefully, sometimes we don't always do better, but that's the thought behind the book, and that's the thought behind this discrimination piece. And so that when things come up, when things happen, I'm hoping that our young people can make a decision of, what should I do with this? Should I start documenting something? Should I go home, talk to my parents, talk to my community, my elders? Should I go to HR? Do I need to go as far as hiring an employment lawyer, which I don't think every case is going to lead to that. But I think that, again, just being informed about your rights as a worker. And even in the back of the book, I put a list of different resources that if people want to do more study, they can. You can go to the Department of Labor website. You can look up the rights right here for workers in Maryland, depending on your age, right? Because the work hours and the rights, they differ for young people as opposed to adults, right? And I think they should be informed of that. So I wanted to again start the book with that, just as like a gut check in a way. We lead into some of the other subjects, because I think that particular topic is missing from nearly every employment guide I've ever read. They don't even talk about racism or white supremacy. They act like it doesn't exist. It's like if you just show up and you have your resume and your nice suit and you give that firm handshake, like you'll get the job and you'll live happily ever after.
Not true. Not true at all. Not true at all. So even from, because I'm not all the way finished, but it made me reflect on my own journey. I'm in school to finish my doctorate. So, and as I progressed, so when I went and got my double bachelor's, I was really excited, and I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna get da 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 da. I've worked in nonprofit management, different all kinds of things in nonprofits. And it just seemed like the more you give, or the more you go out and get, and then we got my master's, got a double master's, and I'm like, yes, I'm gonna get this. I know I can get this.
Yes.
And still it was like, well, you have all this experience, so you're overqualified, or well, you just don't have this skill. So I'm like, okay, so I have everything else, but well, this overlaps this. No. So I understand that. So even with youth, I've even come to the point where my kids, I always told them to center in what they were interested in. Okay. Even if it meant creating your own job, creating your own business, having that side hustle where you could do your art, etc. Because you're going to be seen as that black face that came in the door before they even look at your credentials. You know what I mean? I'm 54, mother of 3 adult children, and I've even seen employers go in and look at my social media. I mean, I don't post too much of anything now. That's my neighbor. But yes, this is a morning ritual. It's a child on the spectrum, but I understand that because I'm a mother of a child who's on the spectrum. But it is, and even there with my son who's on the spectrum, even though he had straight A's, he graduated, he's in college. If he goes before someone, they're like, "Oh, you're you're autistic. Oh, okay. Oh, you have this." That's not part of the job description.
Right. Which they think means that you're incapable of doing the job.
Right. But he wasn't. So for me, if he got straight A's in school, and he's in college, that should have been right there. He's gonna come to work on time. He's gonna do those things. But because he has been labeled automatically because of his, I would say his disability, he's already seen as he's not going to be successful. He's not going to do this. When in reality, with our research, we see a lot of doctors who have autism, a lot of researchers who have autism, a lot of psychiatrists that have autism. So, I mean, it's a show, The Good Doctor, who has autism. So, like you said, with all the barriers that are going on with the kids, with the youth, excuse my French, kids, I always say kids because I'm 54, but when they're dealing with inequities, when they're dealing with racism, how do you think they should manage their stress level? I know with me, there's a level where you have to find a balance in how to react, when to react, and in what fashion you need to react. Because, if you're new to the workforce, you're a young person and someone comes up and yells at you and you're not used to that. If no one ever told you those hidden truths of what it is to be an African-American workforce, you're going to be reactive. You're going to don't holler at me. Don't talk to me that way. And you're not going to have a job. So how would you provide advice to a youth who is fresh? I mean, he got his job at Burger King, and I'm having a bad day, and I'm saying I would like to have da 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 da, and he's repeating what I said, but then I changed my mind because I'm going through the many phases of quandra, and I say, "No, you did not hear me right. I don't want this. I wanted this, this, and this, and this, and you didn't give it to me."
Right
now, if he's not prepared, he's going to react to me. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely, and maybe even if he is prepared, right? I think our young people, they're not perfect. They're not going to always do everything perfectly as they were taught, just like we don't, right? That we were taught to do. But I do think, a sense of preparation would help to, I would say, lessen those things, right? I think that if you're informed about, or if you're going into fast food, it's a certain type of environment that you're going into that's very fast paced. It can be very aggressive at times. You're dealing with a lot of customers. It can sometimes not be the cleanest environment. Like there's a lot of things that you should be informed of before even going into a fast food job, that maybe the person who was interviewing you, they're like, this is the perfect thing ever. Everything is great. Right. Then you start day one. It's like, wait, I didn't realize this. So for that young person, even before getting that job, I would say, hey, do you know anybody else that works in fast food who can maybe give you some insight, give you some thoughts? Like maybe they have a friend or family member or a classmate who has worked in fast food that can say, hey, this is the type of environment that it is. And also, like I said a little bit earlier, because this is the type of environment, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. You should be aware of these things. And even the example that you gave earlier, like, I don't think any employer should be yelling at an employee. But if that does happen, right, how do you respond? How do you react, right? Because you might want to lash back, but you also have that thing where you want to keep that job because you're like, I want this sense of security. And so I think some of that is that it's a personal decision, and it's a kind of internal thing that they have to figure out. because I'm not one to always say, stay at that job that's treating you a certain way, right? But even in the book, I talk about, sometimes the best decision is to leave. Sometimes the best decision is to say, you know what, this is not an environment that is conducive to my growth and development. That's not providing a healthy work environment for me. So I want to go and do something else. And that's the way that you do that, right? I describe in the book where I used to work at Stop Shop and Save, the one on Hoffer Road that has been closed for forever.
I did too. I did that part-time so that I could get my pharmacology certification. I did that too. I worked in the evening.
Okay. Well, I literally worked there 2 days.
I worked there in the evening. I didn't stay long because there was a particular manager in the evening that would just like agitate you, just try to see how she could, because she was miserable. Yeah. So you stayed 2 days. Okay. I stayed a month because I needed that.
Yeah, and I was young, and I had another part-time job. It was during the summer. I didn't really need it, but I was like, during the summer, let me try to make some additional money on top of this youth works job that I had. And so I went there literally 2 days, and I just despised the experience, not even just from my supervisor, who I describe in the book, but even from customers. And I just didn't know how to handle it. And I don't think I really valued the job enough because it was just given to me. I didn't have to interview for it. My dad knew the regional manager. And she was like, you want the job? It's yours. And so, all right. So I went there, again, literally worked 2 days, never went back. And I didn't think about, what are all the effects of me not going back?
So right? I have a question for that. That was one of the things that you did stress, the strategies of exiting your job. Why do you think that is a valuable tool that you should know? Wouldn't it be better just to leave the job? And what happens when you do? What follows you when you do that? With that, does that count against the youth, or does that what kind of learning experience would you have leaving a job like you said you did?
For sure. So in my particular example, I left abruptly, no 2-week notice, no conversation, nothing. I just left. And, in hindsight, there were a few things that I think were impacted. One, I think, was my resume, because I can never put that job on my resume, or at least I would never want to, because they might say, well, you worked there for 2 days. What happened? And now I got to say, I just left, right? And that's not a good example to take on to the next job. And also, I mentioned that my dad knew the regional manager who just gave me the job. And so I could have potentially damaged their relationship. She's like, hey, I gave your son this job. He just didn't show up, So I don't know. Maybe I created a rift between them that was unintentional, because I'm just, doing my own thing. I'm not thinking about all the repercussions that could be an effect of it. And so what I try to tell the young people is that as best as you can, I know you want to leave if you want to. I'm never a proponent of somebody just staying just to stay. But if you want to leave, do it in a thoughtful way. Do it in a way that your supervisor is informed of your preparation to leave. Let them know, at least try to give them a couple weeks notice. Wind down any major projects that you're working on. Like, try to find new owners for those projects or new tasks. Make sure your supervisor is aware of that. I would also start to collect contact information for people in the workplace that could be references for you in the future, or they could be cool people that you can learn from and build with, and network with. Add them to your professional network. So start to collect those phone numbers. If y'all want to connect on social media, connect on social media. But I find that in going from workplace to workplace, there's usually at least a few people that you're like, I want to keep in contact with this person. Sometimes it might be somebody trying to date somebody, but oftentimes I'm thinking about, they might want to start a business that you might want to be a part of in the future, or they might want to go to a college that, I like the way that they was talking about that college. I want to learn more, right? You find different ways to connect with people. And so, again, that's my recommendation. But we know that, at times, this is not the norm. I don't want this to be a regular occurrence, but there may be at times, there may be times when you do have to quickly leave because this is going to get ugly. I don't know. It might turn into a fight. It's something that you just can no longer control. But whatever the decision is that you make, you have to be ready to deal with the repercussions of that decision. And so if you're leaving a job without having another job, it may be an income thing. You might have to be ready for the next month or whatever to not have any income coming in that you did have coming in. You may have to be ready to say, you know what, I don't want to put that job on my resume. I don't want to reference from there. So I'm not worried about that. Whatever it is that you choose to do, you have to be ready to deal with that. And so that's what I also tell young people, because it's not always black and white. It's not always to do that. Sometimes whatever decision that you make, it may not always be an easy decision, but whatever decision it is that you make, you have to be ready and knowledgeable of like, okay, this is what I have to deal with as a result.
Okay. In your book, you did stress the importance of creating a resume that represented that youth's best self. Exactly what did you mean by that, and why is that important for the youth to do that?
That resume is key. It's like your credibility, it's that document that serves as your credibility when it comes to employment. And so I always tell young people, it's like your cred around the way. Like, like, how do people know you? How do people view you around in your community? And they might know you. You might be an athlete. They might be like, oh, he's a great athlete. Or you might be a student that gets straight A's and everybody knows you get straight A's. When it comes to employment, nobody knows you a lot of times.
Real.
You're walking into these new spaces where they don't know you from in your community a lot of times. They're not aware of you. They're getting hundreds, if not thousands, of applications and resumes all the time. So on your resume, you want to have essential things that include your education. You want to have your work experience, any awards that you've ever earned that are, geared around supporting you with educational employment. You want to have it aligned properly, right? Because sometimes we have resumes that are just like all over the place. And I really like Indeed.com because they have a template that you can use. And it's free. You can kind of fill in your information. It'll format it. And then you can click download, and there you have it. I remember being a teenager and putting together a resume, and I know it had errors on it. I know it had problems, but I just wanted to submit it to the job without anybody seeing it. I didn't let my dad see it, my teachers, my guidance counselor. I had all these people around me who I could have been like, hey, can you take a look at my resume? Give me some feedback. But I wanted to be so independent that I just submitted it anyway. And I'm sure maybe it resulted in jobs not hitting me back at the time because maybe there were a bunch of misspelled words or maybe it just wasn't as clean as it should have been. But I always encourage young people, as early as you can, 14, 15 years old, you can start your resume. You don't have a lot of work experience. You can put volunteer experience. In Baltimore City Public Schools, you have to get 75 hours of community service. You can put that on your resume to show how you gained those hours. You can put any clubs, activities that you're a part of. You might be on the student government. You can put that on your resume to show, hey, I'm a leader. I'm a person who's, about the work of leadership in my school and in my community. And that's very valuable because oftentimes young people, they may not have resumes. And so if you have one and another candidate maybe doesn't have one, or theirs doesn't look, as presentable as yours, that could kind of give you that upper edge. So I encourage young people to create those resumes and keep updating them. You want to have the same one when you're 18 that you had when you was 14, because hopefully things will have changed. You want to have up-to-date information on it.
Okay. Another important area that you stressed in your book is integrity in the workplace. Why should a youth see that as valuable?
Yeah, integrity is everything. It's one of those core values that I think we all should have, especially as young people. They they represent not just themselves, but they represent their families, their communities. A lot of times, as Black people, especially in spaces where there aren't a lot of us, it's like we have to represent all of us in a way. And so I think we have to keep at the top of mind that, our culture is important no matter where we go. And so if we're going into a workplace, and this is what I specifically talk about in the book, when we go into a workplace, we have to keep our cultural integrity at the forefront, right? So our Blackness is important, not just in the workplace, but in general. And so how do you still show up as a Black youth, or how do I show up as a Black man when I go into workplaces? Like that's something that I'm always thinking about and that I'm always trying to grapple with, because I know that it's important to me. And I know that we've seen Blackness as, like, in a lot of ways, just like this evil sort of thing that we constantly have to combat and show, like, no, this is a gift. This is not a curse. And so I want our young people to think about that. And so they might be in a workplace and they hear people talking negatively about, not even their Blackness. They might even have another cultural identifier. And so they have to be thoughtful and mindful around, sometimes saying, like, hey, that's not okay. I'm not feeling you saying that. That's not the way that I view myself, or that's not the way that I want to be represented. And we know that we've been in workplaces where there might be this running joke that's really not funny, right? It's like, everybody else is laughing. Do I laugh? Do I not laugh? Do I say something? Am I willing to be the quote unquote outcast in this space? Because everybody's like, they're seeing this one thing as funny, and I'm just not viewing it that way. And so I want to say to young people, it's okay to speak up if you feel the need to. It's okay to say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with that. Or that's not the way that I feel. Because even when it comes to Black people, we're not monolithic, meaning that we don't all see things the exact same way. And, there are Black people all around the world. I might not see the same thing as another Black person over in London. I don't know. But, just being aware and being thoughtful is the major intent of the integrity piece in the book.
Well, I know that as a youth, I worked at a place where it may have been a handful of African Americans, and there was some jargon where they thought it was politically correct to share their opinions of what they felt that African Americans were. They didn't say African Americans; they said Blacks or colored people were, or other nationalities, other ethnic groups. The first time I looked at my supervisor and I was like, this is really inappropriate. And she's like, but that's a supervisor. Okay, well, that's even more inappropriate. But I had a woman, an older woman, who said, well, we're going to put this down in writing and we're going to take it to his supervisor, who thought the joke was funny. So she said, well, you got to keep going up over. And fortunately, it was a woman who basically shared with me that it wasn't appropriate. And thank you. It was refreshing that someone actually didn't, because most people were afraid of him. So I did get suspended for 2 weeks. But when I came back, he had to give me that money back. But it was just the point that they felt that it was okay because no one else has said anything. And that's what he basically told me. He said, you're the only one who's ever said it. They've laughed at it and they were colored. And I said, well, I'm not colored. I'm not colored. I don't have arrangements of colors on my skin. I'm Black. I'm African American. And he was later fired as a result. Then people behind the scenes started complaining, but I was the only one. So I didn't feel bad to be outcasted, because I really wasn't outcasted. But one of the things I wanted to also give you a platform to tell people how they can get in touch with you, to get your book, to even have a conversation with you. So William Hullabaloo, who is one of the co-host. He's one of the actual people who has a show 5 days a week. He said, being honest about your feelings and what you see is critical to reach understanding.
Yes, that's honest. I mean, that's an honest
Well, thank you,
response.
Will.
I think we have to be open and honest and sharing our feelings. In and outside of the workplace. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we are human beings having a journey of life,
Mm-hmm.
and I think in order for us to make it as fulfilling as it can be, we
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing and open to share about what we need from ourselves and what we need from others. So that's certainly a part of it. But in order to contact me, you
Oh,
can
yeah,
go.
hold on. I got one more question before you do that because you're going to have your own screen.
Got it.
Do you think that the skills and tools that you provide in your book is transferable to real life, to everyday life, and why?
Absolutely. And I say absolutely because I literally have talked to teens who have told me that the book has helped them
Mm-hmm.
with employment. So it's helped them think more thoughtfully about their resume, or help them think more thoughtfully about interviewing, or even the discrimination piece. They've said, nobody's ever talked to me about this before. So I appreciate you for putting that in this book. So these are not just my words and me like just bigging up my book because I wrote this book. I definitely don't think it's a perfect book, and like I said, I want to do another edition to
Mm-hmm.
enhance it a bit. However, I do feel like it's very actionable. It's very real world. At the end of most of the chapters, they have steps that you can take. So it's not just like me giving all this theoretical information. There are things that you can literally do in the real world today. So hopefully improve your experience as a Black teen worker. So to answer your question, absolutely.
Well, no book is ever perfect, but I think by reading your book, I could see myself in different situations. Um, it's always good to check in, check out, reflect, get new information so that you can move on. That's how we evolve. That's how we grow. But I appreciate your honesty because your experiences, although they may not have communicated, you give them tools, you give them resources, you give them a real life experience. You give them a situation that they can go, oh yeah, I remember that. I didn't walk out, but I did put in my 2 weeks notice. I did talk to the supervisor. So it's a rites of passage almost to navigating through. Because almost like looking for a job is like having a job because you're trying to find your niche at that place. So I'm going to give you a moment to let the viewers know how they can get your book, how they can get in touch with you. And I just want to say thank you for coming.
And I want to say thank you again for the invite. This has been a wonderful interview experience. So to get in contact with me, you can simply go to albertphillipsjr.com to learn more about me. If you're like, hey, I just want to grab that book, I'm really interested in that book. I try to make it simple for people. You can go to yallhiring.com and it'll take you right to the book page. If you want to connect with me on social media, I'm on Instagram at the ambitious Black guy. I also have an Instagram for the book, which is Yall Hiring Book on Instagram. You can connect with me on there. If you want to shoot me an email to talk further, you can email me at hello@albertphillipsjr.com. And I don't have a robot responding. It'll be me. And I look forward to connecting with you all.
But on that note, I'm going to say thank you for joining us for Community Connections, Resources, and Gardening. And Mr. Phillips, when you do that revision, let me know and we'll bring you back and see what things you've updated. But I want to also wish you much success in grad school. I know the sacrifice that you're taking because I remember the master's, and now I'm taking on the doctorate program, and it's a beast, but it's something that I need to take it to the next level because I do believe that youth are valuable, but I also believe that it's very important that those parents who don't know that we educate them so that they can be profound in their children's life. As a result, we'll start having more youth businesses, more youth professionals, more youth who are employed in jobs that are going to appreciate them, because they're going to know that there are people like you and I and others who are going to be beelining on them to make sure that their practices are ethical, that they are treating youth and adults alike, professionally and respectfully. So on that note, thank you and enjoy this beautiful day. It's beautiful today. So what are you going to do today?
Morgan homecoming weekend. So
on that note, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.